Say hi, I'm Kevin Kuhls, Technical Solutions Architect with Forward Networks, and I'm going to chat with you about what's new with Forward Networks Network Query Engine. Well, our success is grounded in one thing. You're awesome. You, the security engineers, and you also, Tom, yes, the network architects and engineers and operators. If we just get you the data you need and give it to you in a way that's easy to consume and flexible, but get out of the way, you're going to figure out way more than we ever could have. So in that frame of mind, we designed NQE. We gathered all that configuration and state that Brandon was talking about earlier today, from the routers and switches and firewalls and load balancers and cloud networking and virtual switches, all in one place. And from there, regardless of the authorization mechanisms and connectivity mechanisms to get it all there, but also to normalize that data across our dozens of vendors we support. And on top of that, we throw in some cool functions that'll make it a little bit easier to manipulate that data. But under it all, it's always you. Your use cases, your ingenuity, and of course, your data right in the middle. Well, let me introduce Walter. He's a new engineer. He wants to really prove his value to the team. He's eager to get out there. He's got a couple of use cases. They're simple, but familiar. BGP router IDs, he wants to make sure those are right, and he wants to also make sure that he's got the right MTP servers configured on all of his devices. He's going to go through some steps along the way on his automation journey, his familiarity with NQE. And let's see if you can agree with some of those steps along the way. So first thing, he's ready to dig into Forward. He's all right, I got all this configured state here. Let me look at my devices. Okay, I want to find my router ID. Let me see, type it in, router, BGP. Shoot, this one's not configured. I got to go to the BGP summary. And all right, there it is. Okay, now I got to find my NTP. Wait a second. This is still just CLI. It's got to get better, right? Well, fortunately, Walter, and really any self-respecting network engineer, is a tech field day fan. So he remembers a much younger guy with a good bit more hair, say several years back. We all grew up with CLI. We built this wonderful relationship with it. We grew accustomed to it. But the times come, we have to see other people. But who? Well, fortunately, he saw another Tech Field Day presentation from our own Andy, who you'll meet later, introducing Forward's Network Query Engine. And that's what Brandon was talking about earlier today, where we're going to let you, the user, directly interface with your network, but like a database. We've got this vendor abstraction layer right there in the middle. So you don't have to worry about being a subject matter expert for all the different vendor syntax. All right, well, tell me more. Well, the best way to tell you is with a story. So once upon a time, there was a great big network with thousands of routers, switches, firewalls, all across the land. It was so big that it was kind of tough to keep all your configurations straight. There was some sprawl over time. There was a little bit uniqueness, almost a fingerprint based on who actually configured that device. Then there was an outage. And it was their highest revenue generating site. Everybody was going nuts. They found the issue, configuration problem. But of course, what's the first question everybody gets the next day? Anybody? How do we make sure it never happens again, right? Oh gosh, that's a lot of devices. There's a reason why the configuration sprawl happened in the first place, right? Well, fortunately, they were Forward customers. And they remembered about this NQE they could use. So what we do, and to break down into every query we talk about, it may sound foreign because maybe we're not all database folks. We're network engineers, we're security operators, but we can all track gathering data, making some filtering of information, iterating over data. So we have this for each clause. Think about just going through a list one by one about each device in your network. or each interface within that device, or each routing protocol, or each VRF. Then you'll have a where clause, a filter. Okay, I want to find my exact scenario. In this case, it was for that configuration and state that was providing that outage. And then you need a select criteria. What do I need to pull out so that I have actionable data? So we did that. We found a bunch of more issues. And whew, thank goodness we didn't get all those to come breaking as well. So they made the changes, and there was great rejoicing. And we continued this process over and over for a lot of the issues they ran into. We've got hundreds of queries built working with our customers, adding to the greater good so that everyone doesn't need to experience the same pain and problems or recreating all these different queries. Another customer, they had what they called holiday checks. It did not put them in the holiday spirit. There's a lot of work. They didn't look forward to it, and it was to get ready for their busiest time of year. So fortunately for them, also leveraging NQE, they were able to turn those checks and codify or codify, however you want to say it, into queries. So now they do them every day. They have those checks validated every time they collect on their network. Maybe that's 4 or 5 times a day. Maybe that's around change windows. That's up to them about how often they collect. But now they know where they stand every day of the year, not just right going into the busy time. And they can actually enjoy their holiday. So, all right, Walter's all in. He's ready to do it, okay? We want to know, but there's 2 key steps. I have to know what I have. Great, that's just kind of essentially exporting a list or breaking it down where I am. And then once I know that, I can define correctness. So Walter's ready to jump into Network Query Engine. Minimize that. So first off, we're looking for our router ID. We can look through this beautiful data model that goes on for days. All the different configuration state that's normalized and available to us. So we're looking for router ID. Well, it's not an interface. It's under network instances. Oh, there it is. But how do I get it out? Fortunately, I've got this little handy plus icon. Gives me the query to copy. Well, all right. There we go. There is my router IDs for my entire network. I've got my for each clauses, my where filters, and my select criteria. And now I've got the devices, what their BGP router IDs are. I'm ready to move to that next step. Likewise, for NTP, we have not every possible configuration and state in that normalized data model. So that's where you can use ways to look into the config or any state file that we've collected. And we even give you the option to add custom collection. Say there's some show command we never even thought to collect that didn't have anything to do with the forwarding database, like maybe licensing information, who knows? You can pull that in and correlate that in the platform as well. So we're going to look for those NTP servers. Boom. Got our, again, for each, where, select. Going to be a recurring theme. So now we know what we got. We're ready to define correctness. And Walter asks around, he says, okay, the router ID should map your loopback 0 IP. Okay. Wash, rinse, repeat. For each, where, select for my loopback. That's what I want the loopback, what's the loopback IP is for that device. And then by same for each, where, collect, or select for my BGP. And just compare the two. So here I have, well, there's a lot of things without a loopback. So I've got some opportunity for improvement, as we would say. So I'm ready to move on. And I'm going to start defining correctness for my NTP servers. Oh, wait, server guy comes down. It's like, hey, Walter, great news. We are going to regionalize NTP. Initially, Walter's like, that's fantastic. And then he realizes, how am I going to check that? So takes a step back and says, all right, well, anything that is structured, I can build that into my query as well. So what do I have? I've got my regions. I've got my devices that live in each of those regions, and I only put a couple in here to keep it short. And then what are my servers in each of those regions? And just correlate that with what I collect for those NTP servers. Yeah, for each, where, select. And now I've found a couple of cases that need to be updated. I have some actionable information to move forward with. Fantastic. The word's getting out on Walter. People are very excited about what he's able to do, and they want to get in on it. Say, well, Walter, I've got to know what all the DNS servers are. I want to make sure those are correctly configured on my devices. But what about my rendezvous points or, TACAX servers? I don't know, whatever else they need to validate and make sure is correct within their devices. I say, hey, Walter, can you show me how I can do this as well? He says, you bet. I'm going to take lead on this, prove my value to the team. But that's a lot of queries. That's a lot of data. How are we going to keep that up to date? I don't want to have to go into each of those queries over and over and over, making sure they all have the right up-to-date information. But fortunate for Walter, a couple months ago, we released NQE modules. So it's essentially like a central library that you can import or export to get the data where you need. So you have one thing to maintain for data or for shared functions. Because maybe Walter's a little bit more comfortable with making the complex functions. He can share them and collaborate with the rest of the team. So we define our net intent. We've got all of our different types of servers, our regions, devices in the regions. Again, that didn't change. We added to our NTP and DNS, TACAX, multicast, whatever. And all we need to do is, with our handy export code in front of that, and with each up at the top, we're going to import that file, and there you go. Same thing, for each where select to compare those, and I'm getting the same answers. So now I have an even more flexible method. The words got out even higher. Now Walter's boss is saying, Walter, this is fantastic. I want to congratulate myself for hiring you. It was a great idea. And I guess you did a good job too. So next he says, I was in the IT staff meeting the other day. Everybody's talking about keeping our data in one place, infrastructure as code. And I don't know what all that means, but back in my day, we had a CVS. He's a drugstore? No, concurrent versioning system. And we would keep CSVs of all our data in there. Walter, first looks up on Wikipedia to understand what he's talking about. He's like, oh, you mean a Git repo? It's like, yeah, that. So now he's like, well, that's great, but how do I pull it in? Well, fortunately for Walter, today we're announcing external sources for NQE. So now you can pull in just about anything with an API and have that data right in the model. So think about that for a second. You can have Git, that'll encourage migration to GitOps. And, another tech field, a reminder, a couple years back, our own Fabrizio had an awesome CI/CD demo with Ford and how it can help you through that process. And another thing about, we saw earlier, our friends from Network to Code, I can use that source of truth, that IPAM from my Nautilbot or Netbox or ServiceNow or whichever, you particularly attest to. So we go back to our Ford platform. We take a look at, this is what, Craig was showing before, the different devices and cloud accounts we connect up. And now we've got this new one called external sources. So I can add one. Say, all right, REST API, Git repo, SQL database. And what we have built out of here is this, got a couple to pull from. We've got this YAML, a little dark, but we got a YAML that we're pulling in the data from for our Git repo. That's the same site and device and all that structure that we were talking about before. But all this is kept in a version control system. Makes things a lot easier to work together as a team. And we've got our central source of truth as well with our IPAM and all the data there we can pull in from. We built those in. We go back into NQE. We look at our big, beautiful data model. Now at the bottom, just like anything else, I can include those. So say I want to bring in that IPAM data. Again, for each where select, pulling that data to know all my different IP addresses. Well, thanks to that, now Walter can pull on that same data from that YAML in our Git repo and compare it against that. We got a few more because I had the complete list of all the devices in there. We can see he sees actionable data of what to update. Now we get into some really interesting use cases. I had a customer just a few weeks ago hit me up and say, we have a problem with devices that get turned off. They're either part of portable kits, or maybe we're trying to save power, shutting down a building. And so those devices aren't in that collection from forward because they're turned off, they're in transit, what have you. And we keep running into the problem where people, all they do before they deploy something is they ping, or they look at the source of truth, but that could get out of date. How do we marry those two together? So in this case, we're going to use that same for each where select for the IPAM, compare that with all the IPs we've collected on the devices, another set of for each where select, and say, well, show me IPs that are in one and not in the other. Well, there's some missing on this one, but also show me where there's a conflict, where there's an IP that should belong to a different device in one system versus the other. We just got in front of that IP address conflict, so they didn't have that issue. It's all about bringing in the data you have to make smart solutions. Right in here in this platform, I guess the best way to bring it up is you're taking your as-built and your built to, and you're reconciling them all within the platform. Now, NQE is built to be approachable. Wherever you are on your journey, or Walter's or our customers, so that you can see some familiar steps along the way, I'm sure, but take a look and say at each step along the way, we can leverage our secret weapon, that ingenuity of our engineers and customers. That way, they can add to the collective, make a difference and solve problems within their environment. But we didn't just sit back and watch our engineers and customers solve their problems. We got busy. Our product management and developing teams had meetings with our customers. They listened to our customers. So what can we do to make this better? What performance improvements can we include to make it easier on you? So we brought in some features like NQE diff. If you don't measure it, you're never going to get better. This way, it allows us to compare how many violations do we have from one snapshot to the next. If it can't scale to your network, what's the point? This is all just window dressing. We put in the work to scale to any size network. We have customers today with tens of thousands of network devices, with thousands of queries running every day, no problem. Bringing in more data, whether it's adding more things to the data model, the normalized data model, or bringing in all the collected information we have from all the state and config, or allowing you, the customer, to bring in custom commands to add more data, or the extreme, this external data where we can call via the API. And think about that. We didn't just build an integration with a system. We built a system for integration and give you, the customer, the power to connect to the correct API where your data is. You don't have to wait for us to develop for that because it's right in your hands. Now, our CTO, Brandon, explained it to me a while back really well. He said, Kevin, we are a software assist. Our goal is just to make the network data actionable. He's right. Because he knows it, and now we know it. You're awesome. If we just give you what you need and get out of the way, you're going to create incredible solutions, queries, modules that go out to the collective for the greater good, so that no one has to recreate or relive all these same problems.
What are our theoretical limits of the size of data you can pull in from individual external sources and total cumulative amount of data for all external sources?
That's an excellent question. So usually, so we're building in mechanisms that will allow for like paging and things like that for really large API calls, because often the vendor itself is going to break those up if it's a really big API call. So that's the first step of that, is to make sure that we can handle that paging to get all the data in, right? Because that can add some complexity. But as far as the size and breadth of the data, we're talking about JSON. We're talking about YAML. That doesn't take up a lot of room. Mm-hmm. I honestly don't have a number for you. That's actually a great question. So that's something we'll have to really put in the work to see how far can we go. But we haven't met the limit yet.
Would a guess be basically whatever you're running this on is the limit? I mean,
yeah. So, well, when you think about it, when you think about really big networks, like say you're a big service provider network and you have, 20,000 SP routers that have, millions of routes and prefixes, that's a big snapshot, right? And we can handle that. So this JSON data, I'm not too concerned with.